Hello and thanks for joining us. To our viewers here in Korea and around the world, it's 9 a.m. on Monday, April 21st here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broom. The sun has risen here in Korea, but it looks set to be another dark day for the nation. The death toll from the Sewol-ho ferry sinking has risen to 64 this morning, with the discovery of 5 more bodies from the disaster site in Jindo. 238 people, mainly children, remain unaccounted for. We await news of any survivors, but the chances are extremely bleak. 5 full days now since the ferry went down. Let's go right to Hwang Sung-hee standing by at the Paengmok-hang harbour, the closest port to where the accident took place. Sung-hee, what's the latest?
Mark, it's only 9 a.m. here in Korea, and already 5 bodies were retrieved this morning, raising the total confirmed death toll to 64. Now, the bodies have yet to be identified, but they are believed to be high school students. Some of them were found on the 4th floor of the vessel, which is where the cabins for all these high school students were, and which is where all these high school students were believed to be at the time of the accident. The number of survivors, meanwhile, remains unchanged at 174, and still more than 200 people remain missing inside that sunken ship. Now, 5 days have passed since the capsizing of the Sewol-ho ferry, but many of the family members are clinging onto their last bits of hope. Mark?
Sung-hee, we hear the search and rescue operations are picking up speed, though.
That's right. Rescue teams continued their search and rescue operations throughout last night. A remotely operated vehicle, or ROV, which was sent by the United States, was deployed last night to assist divers conduct their rescue operations inside the vessel. The rescue team also extended one of the 5 guide ropes by about 15 meters, which will allow divers to go deeper into the sunken ferry. The divers are focusing their search on the 4th floor of the ship, which, like I said, is where the cabins of the Tanwon High School students were. 32 Navy vessels, 90 fishing boats, 34 aircraft, and more than 550 divers will be taking part in today's rescue operations. Meanwhile, the weather will work in our favor today. As you can see, it is very sunny here, and the tidal waves will remain relatively low at around 1 meter. This has been Hwang Sung-hee reporting from the Paengmok-hang harbor.
The parents of the missing are now into the 6th day of waiting for any news of their sons and daughters who are on board the ill-fated ferry. They are growing increasingly angry as details continue to emerge about the sinking and the failing rescue operation. The families have been huddled in a gymnasium near the accident site in Jindo, where our Hwang Ji-ae joins us live. Ji-ae.
Mark, it's relatively calm here, but the atmosphere is getting very tense as divers are pulling out bodies this morning. While the families are trying to stay calm, some are yelling. Cries of grief were heard as they check a television screen showing a list of descriptions of what the newly discovered bodies look like, so the families can identify their missing ones. It's extremely heartbreaking. And with no news updates of survivors, hopes are dimming for many families here. Many of them have been staying here since last Wednesday. They look very, very exhausted, many barely able to eat or sleep. Rumors are also spreading among the families here about how rescue operations are going, how the bodies are being handled, and more. It seems like there's no trust on the authorities. I also had a chance to talk with one of the volunteer workers here, and he said that trust is in short supply. Chung Jae-woo came here 3 days ago to offer a helping hand for families waiting for their missing loved ones here at the Jindo Auditorium. He says distrust is mounting here.
The government is not giving out exact answers to what the families here have asked for, so their anger seems to be running to an extreme. The families don't even trust each other, and there was a fight among them.
Mark, I also had a chance to talk with the families waiting for their child to return, and they could barely speak. As they started the conversation, they got all teary. They were unable to speak. This was Hwang Ji-ae reporting live from Jindo Auditorium. Back to you, Mark, in the studio.
Now, a recording of the ferry's radio distress call released on Sunday shows there was confusion and indecision by the crew. The families of the victims and the missing are demanding to know why and how the crew was able to escape while the passengers were ordered to stay put in their cabins. Na Hyung-kyung has the details.
Even if you speak Korean, it's difficult to make out what the two sides are saying. But what's evident is that the situation sounds quite dire. The joint investigation team composed of the police and the prosecution released the transcript on Sunday. The Sewol-ho ferry and the Chindo Vessel Traffic Service, which is the Marine Traffic Control Center, made contacts 11 times and communicated for 31 minutes. The control center first contacted the sinking ferry at 9:06 a.m. Wednesday. At 9:12 a.m., the ferry was already severely tilted. The crew member who was talking to the control center already knew that the people on board were not able to move. The control center told the ferry that the captain needs to decide whether to order passengers to abandon the vessel. That was around 9:25 a.m., but the ferry said it was unable to make announcements because the speaker system was down. And the last time the two made contact was at 9:37 a.m. when the ferry told the control tower that only the people who were able to escape to the left side of the ferry were able to leave the vessel. Whether the captain was in the steering room when the communications were being made is still unknown. Captain Lee Jun-seok is arrested and formally charged for escaping the ship before the passengers. Further investigation will determine whether the captain in fact did neglect his duty by not promptly notifying the passengers about the situation during that 30-minute time frame. Na Hyung-kyung, ARIRANG News.
The site of the accident, Chindo, and the city most touched by the tragedy, Ansan, have been declared special disaster areas. This means they will now have access to special emergency funds, and the government will cover the vast majority of the costs. For more on this, we connect live to our Shin Se-min standing by at our news centre. Se-min.
Good morning, Mark. As you say, the government has officially declared the two areas affected by the accident as special disaster zones. Ansan in Gyeonggi-do Province and Jindogun County in the southwestern province of Jeollanam-do are the two areas designated. Ansan is where the Tanwon High School is located, and the students there made up a majority of the passengers on board the ill-fated ferry. And Chindo is where the Sewol-ho ferry capsized last Wednesday, and it's also where Paengmok-hang harbor is located, the closest harbor to the accident site. These two areas will be able to receive state funds that goes to search and rescue operations. And local taxes, including acquisition tax, will also be waived for those in the area. And although the reduction rate of the taxes vary, health insurance and the national pension is to be reduced by 30 to 50%. Other general taxes will also be either reduced or the deadline for payment will be postponed for up to 9 months. And unlike natural disasters, the damage from man-made incidents like the capsizing of the ferry may differ, so the support will be customized depending on the circumstances of the victims. And also financial assistance will be provided to the victims and their families, including those still waiting for the news of their loved ones.
Se-min, a clearer picture has started to emerge of the time around the capsize with the release by the Coast Guard of that conversation between vessel controllers and the ship. But prosecutors are also broadening their investigations into the crew and the ferry's operator.
Yes, that's right. The prosecutors say they will look into the mistakes made while sailing the ferry, the botched evacuation attempt and early rescue efforts, and other related matters such as the extension of the cabin on the ferry. The Cheonghaejin Shipping Company will also be investigated, as well as some 20 crewmen and the captain Lee Jun-seok. The prosecutors also banned the family that owned the shipping company from leaving the country, as the investigation may be extended. A special task force will be organized for an urgent investigation on the cause of the capsizing. And also on the cause, the Sewol-ho ferry was a 20-year-old ship imported from Japan.
And according to a report submitted by the Cheonghaejin company to the Financial Supervisory Service, the ferry has undergone months of renovation to extend its sailing life for more than 10 years. In cases of phone scams and smishing or the SMS phishing for the text messages designed to lure naive people after the ferry disaster will also be thoroughly investigated. Investigators have also requested to search and confiscate files from popular messaging application KakaoTalk here in the nation to try and piece together the accident using the text messages sent and received by the passengers on board. And the Messaging Corporation has agreed to fully cooperate in the probe. Mark?
The families of the missing are clinging on to hope that their loved ones will be found alive, but most are preparing themselves for the worst now. Our Kim Ji-yeon is standing by at the Korea University Ansan Hospital, where many of the families are gathered. Ji-yeon.
Mark, I'm standing in front of the funeral hall of the Korea University Hospital, which is located in the Ansan city. And the city is where most of the passengers, which more than 320 students went to school and lived there. Bodies are sent from the southern part of the country to this location where family, friends, and the community are gathering to mourn and grieve for the fallen. The body of the vice principal of the Tanwon High School, who is identified by his surname Kang, was released this morning. Mr. Kang committed suicide due to the overwhelming guilt he felt at being rescued and being unable to help the students while on the ferry. Some of the bodies of the students are also held at this hospital, but due to parents' requests, their release was postponed. The bodies will be released at a group memorial altar that will be set up on Wednesday at the Ansan Olympic Memorial Hall for the students and teachers.
People directly affected by this are understandably devastated, but how are the residents of Ansan coping?
Well, Mark, Ansan is located just outside the skirts of the capital city of Seoul, and the population is more than 780,000 here. It's a very vibrant city, but it's also a very cohesive community where everyone knows each other. If one's friend is an acquaintance of another, like a son of a working colleague or a daughter from the community's mom and pop store, upon news that they're missing, there's a hushed silence for several days now as the whole city mourns for the dead. More than 10 events that were scheduled normally at this time of the year has been canceled or has been postponed indefinitely. Well, the warmth of the spring is not found in the city of Ansan. This is Kim Ji-yeon live at the Korea University Hospital at the city of Ansan.
More clues are emerging about what might have caused the Sewol-ho ferry to sink. Our Kim Min-ji reports on 3 possible scenarios that occurred, one after another.
Around 8:30 a.m. on Wednesday, April 16th, the Sewol-ho ferry passed through treacherous waters which are notorious here in Korea for their strong currents. 18 minutes later, the ferry veers suddenly, which is being pointed to as the first factor in the sinking. The stern is believed to have turned 80 degrees to the right.
What it means by the vessel supposedly making a P-turn is that the helm was turned to the right, then back again. But the boat didn't come back to its original position. Operations momentarily froze, which results in the ferry making a complete turn.
Due to the centrifugal force, the vessel tilts to the left. Now this is when the second factor may have come in. Grips holding down on the ferry's freight may have come loose, causing containers and vehicles in the cargo compartment to lift sharply to one side. The weight concentrated on just one side of the ferry causes it to tilt even further. If the vessel had enough dynamic stability, the vessel could have bounced back to the other side and maintained balance. However, due to renovations to increase the vessel's capacity, the center of gravity on the ship had been raised from its original design.
Due to the expansion of the ship, the upper structure has been changed, making the center of gravity much higher. If the center of gravity and buoyancy are far apart, the dynamic stability decreases.
Experts say the reduced dynamic stability caused the vessel to completely submerge because it wasn't able to recover from its initial tilt. They add that the Sewol-ho ferry may not have had enough ballast water, which maintains the balance of the vessel, in order to carry more cargo. As all three factors could have been prevented, experts say the sinking will likely be attributed to human error. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
When it comes to the bodies that are recovered, a series of identification procedures are instituted to ensure accuracy. But with so many grieving families waiting for news, medical staff have begun collecting DNA samples from the families of the missing to help speed up the process. Lee Seung-jae reports.
When bodies are recovered, the first procedure is to check the personal belongings of the victim and their physical appearance, such as their height. If the body is able to be identified, the family is contacted so they can confirm with their own eyes. If the body can't be identified, the body is sent to a nearby hospital for examination, which includes taking DNA samples and fingerprint identification. Blood tests and biopsies are taken if the recovered body has been severely damaged. However, with fears of a sudden rush of bodies being recovered at once and complaints that the procedures have been inefficient, medical experts have begun collecting DNA samples from relatives of the missing passengers. Tents to collect DNA have been set up beside the auditorium where many families of the missing passengers have been spending sleepless nights, as well as at Paengmok-hang harbor near the site of the accident. While rescue divers are putting in great efforts to search for survivors and recover bodies, the time that has passed and the harsh conditions at sea could now make it difficult to identify the bodies. Almost 90% of the relatives of the missing have registered their DNA. Although they are still clinging on to hope their loved ones are still alive, some are preparing for the worst.
My wife still wants to believe our child will come back alive, but looking at the situation now, I just hope our child's body comes back soundly at least.
With unfavorable weather and harsh conditions at sea hampering rescue efforts, the physical and mental health of the families are also deteriorating by the minute.
I took care of my niece for 11 years. I'm so upset. I told her to have a safe trip and she said yes. Since then, I've heard nothing.
Navy officials say the DNA samples will be analyzed as soon as possible. The DNA samples will be sent to the National Forensic Center to see if they match with the victims. Lee Seung-jae, ARIRANG News.
Even those who were not directly involved in the ferry incident can display symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. That's what's happening to the people of Ansan as the second-year students of Ansan's Danwon High School were aboard the Sewol-ho ferry. Son Jung-in reports.
The entire city of Ansan is deep in sorrow. It has been a heart-wrenching time for everyone, even for those who are not directly affected by the disaster.
I see the same news every day. The media are all covering the story 24 hours a day now, and all of the mothers are crying watching it.
Many have complained of sleep disturbances at night and poor concentration during the day.
All of the residents here are depressed and saddened by the accident. We are also angry, thinking about why this happened in the first place.
The entire city is prone to post-traumatic stress disorder, which often occurs after a person has gone through an overwhelming life experience such as this. Back in 2001, after a terrorist attack in New York on 9/11, some 532,000 people were said to have been suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, which made it hard for them to go through their lives while feeling a sense of normalcy for the next month or more. Even an indirect experience through TV or the internet can have a similar impact and produce stress. It's not only the survivors and the families of the missing who are at risk for PTSD, it's also witnesses and rescue operators. But it's the students and teachers from Danwon High School who are assumed to be suffering the most.
They can suffer from insomnia, nightmares, and flashbacks of past traumatic events. In extreme cases, they can have a hard time adapting to their social life, and in extreme cases, it can even lead to suicide.
Symptoms of PTSD can even show up years after an accident, so it is important to keep an eye on anyone with the condition. Experts recommend that people suffering from PTSD see a doctor if they have distressing dreams or a sensitive reaction to their surroundings. In addition, they advise parents and adults to talk with young children and teenagers about the news and limit their exposure. 손정인, ARIRANG News.
The terrible loss of so many young souls has plunged the entire nation into a deep sense of sorrow and despair. In respect to the victims and the missing, TV stations have cancelled entertainment shows, baseball and soccer matches are being played in silent stadiums, and the public have massed for candlelit vigils. Seoul Mi-sorang reports.
An accident that has left so many in disbelief. People all over the country had their eyes and ears fixed on news of the ferry disaster. It was to share the weight of the tragic accident and console families who were told by their children that they love them and that they shouldn't worry. Weekend prime time. Laughter has faded from what would normally be a fierce entertainment competition between the major television networks. With one of Korea's favorite sports, baseball season in full swing, all the loudspeakers and cheerleaders have disappeared from the stadiums. All that is left is the players who solemnly play without any cheering or events. People in Korea are sharing the pain as if it is a loss of their own, something the country has experienced in times of need.
I wanted to help in any way that I could, so I joined the candlelight vigil. I really hope that with the whole country coming together, that a miracle will happen.
During the 1997 Asian financial crisis, the Korean public donated their wedding rings and other gold items to help the country pull out of the economic crisis. And after one of the worst oil spills off the Taean coast in 2007, the area was able to recover its nature after an endless number of volunteers helped clean up the spill. Regardless of whether it is for good or bad times, the nation has been able to come together, setting individual needs aside and sharing a spirit of unity.
Korea has a strong collective sentiment. This is something that is just as important as collective intelligence. The entire country is sharing the sentiment that the students in the sinking are not simply children of other families, but actually part of an extended family. This is the force that brings the country together as one.
서미소랑, ARIRANG News.
Let's get an update on the weather conditions in Jindo. The conditions looks to be improving, as Sung-hee said earlier. Winds should be calmer and waves will be milder than yesterday, reaching 1 meter at the most. And the currents has gotten weaker compared to last few days, and these certain times of the day will decrease the speed of flow. Next is at 1:09 and 6:40 p.m. The speed of tidal currents will slow down at the slow lowest an hour before and after of these indicated times. And it looks like things will get even better from tomorrow as the neap tide occurs. Now, neap tides are the tides that occur when the difference between high and low tides is least. So hopefully during this period, it boosts the rescue and search operations over at the site. And skies will remain mostly sunny, but more clouds might be rolling into the Jindo area and temperatures will be a tad warmer than yesterday. Well, that's all for now, and I'll be back with more updates after 10.
And those are the updates we have for you at this hour. We'll have another special newscast in about half an hour's time as we continue our extended coverage of the search and rescue efforts. You can also find information on our website, arirang.co.kr. Goodbye.